Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we are reading from Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad-Gita as it is, and if I'm not mistaken, the chapter is chapter number 5 and the verse is number 1. Arjuna uvacha sanyasam karmanam Krishna punar yogam cha samshasi yach shreya etayar ekam tanme bruhi sunischitam. So word for word translation, Arjunaha uvacha. Arjuna said, Sanyasam, renunciation, karmanam, of all activities. Krishna, O Krishna. Punaha, again. Yogam, devotional service. Cha, also. Shamsasi, you are praising. Yat, which. Shreyaha, is more beneficial. Etayoho, of these two. Ekam, one. Tat, that. Me, unto me. Bruhi, please tell. Sunishchitam, definitely. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Arjuna said, O Krishna, first of all, you ask me to renounce work, and then again, you recommend work with devotion. Now, will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial? So please repeat after me. Arjuna said, O Krishna, first of all, you ask me to renounce work, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now, will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial? Srila Prabhupada's purport for this verse. In this 5th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, the Lord says that work in devotional service is better than dry mental speculation. Devotional service is easier than the latter because, being transcendental in nature, it frees one from reaction. In the 2nd chapter, preliminary knowledge of the soul and its entanglement in the material body were explained. How to get out of this material encagement by bhakti-yoga, or devotional service, was also explained therein. In the 3rd chapter, it was explained that a person who is situated on the platform of knowledge no longer has any duties to perform. And in the 4th chapter, the Lord told Arjuna that all kinds of sacrificial work culminate in knowledge. However, at the end of the 4th chapter, the Lord advised Arjuna to wake up and fight, being situated in perfect knowledge. Therefore, by simultaneously stressing the importance of both work in devotion and inaction in knowledge, Krishna has perplexed Arjuna and confused his determination. Arjuna understands that renunciation in knowledge involves cessation of all kinds of work performed as sense activities. But if one performs work in devotional service, then how is work stopped? In other words, he thinks that sannyas, or renunciation in knowledge, should be altogether free from all kinds of activity, because work and renunciation appear to him to be incompatible. He appears not to have understood that work in full knowledge is non-reactive, and therefore the same as inaction. He inquires, therefore, whether he should cease work altogether or work with full knowledge. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Agyanatimanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutidevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. When I was in high school, I didn't believe yet in reincarnation. I hadn't come in contact with the Bhagavad-Gita. But already then I had this innate understanding or apprehension that anything I do entangles me in this world. I was thinking in terms of one life, not many lifetimes as we're being taught here in terms of material existence, the sojourn of the soul in material existence in samsara. But still, the principle of action being reactive and entangling one was something that gave me a lot of anxiety. Now when I think in retrospect, having accumulated a little bit of transcendental knowledge by, I believe, the mercy of Krishna and the devotees, I'm almost embarrassed. But back then, as a young teenager, I was in anxiety about where I wanted to go to college, for example. That was like my big first anxiety about entanglement in material life. I had an opportunity to go to Cornell University, an Ivy League school in upstate New York, but I wanted to remain in Paris because my father lived there and I had friends and I could enjoy more in Paris, but yet my career would not be as potentially lucrative or, let's say, prosperous or famous if I chose that route. And I was in great anxiety, and I knew, okay, if I make this decision, if I choose to go to this country or to go to that university, then all sorts of other chain reactions will happen and I won't be able to take the other option I had at the beginning. And philosophers have struggled with this idea of action in the world. Jean-Paul Sartre, speaking of French, this famous French philosopher, right? He, a complete atheist, and whose wife also was not one of the greatest personalities who ever appeared on the scene of Western intellectualism. But he came to the conclusion that somehow or other we have to assume responsibility in this world and just, take a decision and live with it, because we've been somehow thrown in this world and we just have to take responsibility for our actions. Similar actually to what Bhagavad-Gita says in 13:20 or 13:21, that the soul alone is responsible for his or her unhappiness in the material world. That would be the Bhagavad-Gita interpretation of Jean-Paul Sartre, redeeming Jean-Paul Sartre from atheism. But as I said, I think it's something that we all can relate to, this idea of how do we act in this world, how do we act in this particular life so that we get the best possible future. On a larger scale, how do we act in this world so that we get a positive result in the next life? How do we act in this world so that we get free of suffering in the next life? On an even greater scale, how do we act in this world so that we get out of samsara altogether? How do we get freedom from material existence altogether? And among Vaishnavas, we can relish the last sort of esoteric question: how do we live in this world in such a way that we can reawaken our dormant love for God? And we understand that this last question, how do we get love of God, how do we reawaken our love of God, includes liberation from material existence anyway. Right? So Krishna here in these 3 verses, the first 3, we could say, the first 2 or 3 verses of chapter 5, makes a simple point, namely that bhakti is about action with love as an offering. Acting for the sake of God, for God's pleasure, is non-reactive. Action yoga, as Krishna calls it. Right? So let us read together verse 2 and verse 3 together. And we'll start with verse 1, and then we'll go to verse 2, and we'll go to verse 3. So, as we just read, start with verse 1, and then we'll go verse 2, verse 3. Does someone want to read again this verse 1 that we just read with a loud Arjuna-like voice? Okay. The translation perhaps would be even more relevant for those of us who don't know fluent Sanskrit.
Arjuna said, "Oh Krishna, first of all, you asked me to renounce work, and then again you recommend work with devotion. Now will you kindly tell me definitely which of the two is more beneficial?"
Very good. Now verse 2. Someone with an equally powerful voice. And just the translation. Sannyasa karma yogascha.
The personality of Godhead replied, "The renunciation of work and work in devotion are both good for liberation. But of the two, work in devotional service is better than renunciation of work."
Yes. Which spiritual tradition does renunciation of work remind us of? One that is somewhat close to Vaishnavism because it embraces the same texts that we follow, and another, yes, what we would call Mayavad, Advaita Vedanta, Mayavad philosophy. And yes, the second one that I had in mind was Buddhism, right? Voidism or Buddhism, right? Especially, for example, Zen Buddhism, where the idea is that, okay, this world is a world of bondage, every action I do will bring reaction, so then let me stop action altogether. And hence you have this tradition of renunciation, dry renunciation, what we would say, where only if you're a monk, if you have, you forget being a family person, forget being engaged in worldly so-called activities, and if you're in some monastery and you perform intense austerities of negating everything, then only can you get moksha or can you attain nirvana, right? You see the similarity. This tendency to not act, to renounce the world for the sake of liberation, is rooted in a philosophical concept that we as devotees reject. And so I think it'd be interesting to unpack it before moving forward. So what is this notion that acts as the basis of what we would call false or artificial renunciation. It is the idea that this world is false. What is a famous aphorism in Advaita Vedanta's philosophy? Exactly. Brahma Satyam, Jagat Mithya. This Jagat is Mithya. It has no existence. And similarly, in Buddhist thought, at least in the majority of Buddhist thought, because there are some Buddhist traditions which, in a very sort of ironic way, resemble Vaishnavism a lot. For example, it's just as parentheses, there's the Pure Land Buddhists, where the idea is Buddha is like a god figure, a godhead figure who's waiting for the soul in some sort of eternal pure land, and when the soul finally evolves, then he joins Buddha in a personal relationship, which sounds pretty much like a bhakti model, doesn't it? But I think we would be safe to say that most Buddhist traditions, and let's say, for example, the Zen tradition, which is sort of the very extreme Shunyavadi kind of tradition, will espouse this philosophy, this idea that this world is false, or it's an illusion. It has no existence. But the Vaishnavas, on the other hand, repeat what the Bhagavatam says and what the Bhagavad-Gita says. And the Vaishnavas make this very important distinction, namely that this world is temporary, but it's not false. It's real. Why is it real? Because it emanates as a Shakti, as a real Shakti of a real God, of a real Supreme Lord, of a real Supreme Person. So our vision as Vaishnavas, the vision of a devotee vis-a-vis in relationship to this world, is radically different from that of an impersonalist, a Mayavadi as we would call him, or as a Zen Buddhist. We have what Garuda Prabhu, a disciple of Prabhupada who teaches world religions at Christopher Newport University in Virginia, a world-embracing type of theology, as opposed to a world-denying type of theology. Where the world-denying theology is, okay, this world is false, therefore we reject this world. And therefore any activity in this world, by definition, is illusory, no matter how you cut the cake. It's illusory and it's no good. It binds you to illusion further, or it binds you to samsara. And therefore, let us not act. But Krishna says that this material world, which is made up of what? The 5 material elements. How does he call them? Bhinna prakritim. My separated material energy. And so therefore the Vaishnava sees this world, ideally, if he's Krishna conscious, as an energy of his beloved Lord. And when he's very advanced, he not only sees this world as an energy of the Lord, but he sees his Lord himself. Tabor jangam deke na deke tarmurti. What's the second line? It's one of these verses that Bhakti Charu Swami quoted a long time ago in 1994, and somehow that verse stuck with me, but with time, you forget. Stabor jangam deke na deke tarmurti sarvatra ishtadev spurti. In other words, when a pure devotee doesn't even see the material world, he sees his Ishtadev, his supreme worshipable Lord. Just like, for example, a mother sees the sandals of her little baby, she doesn't see the sandals per se, she sees her baby, right? Or when we see, if we have some remnants, some chadar of our spiritual master, or some tadiya of our spiritual master, we worship that as our spiritual master, right? Here, next door, we have so many items that Prabhupada personally used. And those things, even though they're quote-unquote material things, they remind us of Prabhupada, and in that way, they are Prabhupada. Not that we are, impersonalists and we say that these material objects are literally, Srila Prabhupada, but in that sense, they remind us of him. So in a similar way, this material world for a devotee is not a world where we, that we renounce because it's false, but actually we embrace because it's real and because it comes from a real God. And this is where the extremely important notion that Rupa Goswami coined comes into play. Because a devotee accepts this material world as real, and accepts that this world is not an illusion, it's an energy, it's the Shakti of my most worshipable Lord, therefore he or she feels inclined, again if he's Krishna conscious, to engage this world, to connect this world with its source. And hence the notion of, from Rupa Goswami, starts with a Y, next letter is U, next letter is K, Yukta Vairagya. Anasya tasya vishayan yatarham upayunjata nirbhando Krishna sambhande yuktam vairagyam uchyate. That's proper renunciation. And this is what Krishna is talking about here in this verse. Action in Krishna consciousness. Where the devotee sees, Krishna sambhande. Here's a connection. Here's a microphone. I'll use it for Krishna service. Prabhupada uses this example many times, right? I'm using this microphone, and because we're speaking about Krishna, this microphone is no longer to be renounced or to be artificially, how can we say? Yeah, it's permanently unredeemable, profane. You know this idea, profane and the sacred. So there's like things that are forever profane, that you can never redeem them. They're forever lost in the black hole of impersonal, non-existence or non-redeemability. No, it's just a material object which is made of material energy, and this energy emanates from Krishna. Krishna's real, and therefore, because it's Krishna's energy, it should be engaged in his service. And therefore, if I use this microphone to sing the glories of Krishna, to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, then this microphone, it regains its original spiritual nature. Prabhupada gives the analogy of the, how do you call it, the powerhouse. The powerhouse from where cold and hot comes, right? Yes. But from the point of view of the powerhouse, the energy is the same, exactly. So it's really a question of consciousness. It's really just a question of consciousness. The pure devotee is expert in seeing this connection with matter and engaging it in Krishna's service. And not to see the connection with Krishna of a material object or a material career or a material opulence or a particular talent or a particular situation. Not to see the connection with Krishna and not to engage it in Krishna's service is what Rupa Goswami then calls, what's the second? Falgu Vairagya, which means false renunciation. Parpancha katya buddhya hari sambandha vastuna mumukshuri parityago vairagyam falgu katyate. False renunciation. False renunciation. Just like, again, the example of Prabhupada, he used to say, for example, the impersonalist, when you give him money, he says, no thank you, I will not touch. Right? Why? Because money is material and I'm above it. And the Vaishnava, you give him money, he takes it and he hands his left hand and says, give me more. And again, we have a perfect example, a contemporary example in Prabhupada, how he was so expert in engaging matter in Krishna's service. Nothing for oneself, but for the sake of serving Krishna. And serving Krishna means what in this age of Kali? Practically speaking. Yes, of course, the Yuga Dharma, the yagya for this age. In terms of action, of course it's an action. Preaching, spreading the Sankirtan movement, engaging money, engaging talent for spreading the holy name, for spreading this chanting of the holy name. And so, just as Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur rolled into Radhakund in a car. I mean, 40 years ago, there were 2 cars in Vrindavan. Imagine 100 years ago when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur came. He was a sannyasi. We can imagine the revolutionary spirit. we could say that a grihasta has more of an adhikar to engage in yukta vairagya, because in a way he's in the world, he hasn't, I mean, a sannyasi has, even a Vaishnava sannyasi, has renounced social life, has renounced family, has renounced a wife, has renounced a money-making career. So in a way, we could say that a sannyasi is more restrained, right, even in terms of yukta vairagya. And so here comes Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, arriving in what we believe in, what Rupa Goswami described as the sacred, the topmost sacred place in the universe, Radhakund, driving in a car. And he mentions, and there's actually, I quoted this on Facebook yesterday, this quote that Bhakti Vikas Maharaj quotes in his wonderful book on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, where I'm paraphrasing, but Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is saying, in the Bhakti Vaibhav, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is saying that the spirit of renunciation is internal ultimately, and therefore one can maintain a spirit of a beggar. He uses the word because that's what a sannyasi is, right? One can maintain the spirit of a beggar and yet be surrounded by material opulence. Because one's heart is at Krishna's feet. Namama, because no matter what material opulence comes his or her way, he immediately connects it to Krishna, engages it in Krishna's service. And one of my favorite examples is Pundarik Vidyanidhi. Pundarik Vidyanidhi is mentioned in Chaitanya Bhagavat. Mukunda told Gadadhar Pandit, listen, I want you to come and listen to this great sadhu, this great saint, Pundarik Vidyanidhi. And Gadadhar Pandit was kind of reluctant. It's actually an interesting parallel between Prabhupada and his friend who said, come, I want you to meet someone, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. No. And he came, and his life changed. So similarly, in the Leela pastime, Gadadhar Pandit says, okay, let's go. So Mukunda takes him to the house of Pundarik Vidyanidhi. Very opulent house, marble floor, and all sorts of furniture made of elephant tusks and silk, exactly, and the sofas are very opulent. And they come in and they see this figure, Pundarik Vidyanidhi, who has long hair, oily hair, and he's being fanned. He has very, very nice silk kurta and dhoti, very princely, stylish, and he's perhaps even chewing some sort of pan. And immediately Gadadhar Pandit thinks, what? This is who you brought me to here? And Mukunda could tell, okay, he has doubts. Wait a second. So he goes and takes the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, opens it, and Mukunda is described in the Chaitanya literature as someone who could sing the Bhagavatam very beautifully. So he starts singing the Bhagavatam, and he sings this verse where Shukadeva Goswami is amazed and expresses amazement at how Krishna is so merciful, because even though Putana came to kill him by giving him a poisonous nipple, he was so kind to her that he still gave her the kind of liberation that is the same as Yashoda, as that of a mother, right? So Mukunda sings this verse, and Pundarik Vidyanidhi is just there, watching himself in the mirror or doing what seems to be an externally very mundane, almost self-serving kind of thing. And as soon as he hears this verse, Vrindavan Das Thakur describes, he just goes nuts in ecstasy. He just starts ripping his clothes off, pulling his hair out, falling on the floor, screaming. His servants come, try to detain him. He's just like an epileptic fit of ecstasy just from hearing this verse from the 10th canto. So much attachment, so much ruchi. And when will be the day when we, at least speaking for myself, hear a Bhagavatam verse and even have a shadow reaction of that? I mean, we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves. We do. I mean, who has had the experience, you're looking for a Harinam party and then you hear the ching ching ching, you're like, they're there, let's go. So we do have some attachment to Krishna. It's there. I mean, the very fact that we're chanting our rounds every day, the very fact that we're reading our Prabhupada's books every day, the very fact that we're members of ISKCON trying to give our time and money and efforts in spreading the Sankirtan movement shows that we have some attachment to Krishna. But this is on another level. So Gadadhar Pandit sees this, and he realizes, oh my God, I've just committed a great aparad. I've committed a great aparad because I saw this devotee externally. And remember, Rupa Goswami mentions in the Nectar of Instruction, he warns us, right? We should not see the pure devotee from a material point of view. The body of a pure devotee is just like the Ganges, which may be filled with foam and mud, but which still remains transcendental. So similarly, one should overlook a pure devotee's body, even if he's infirmed or deformed or old or sickly, or we could say extremely opulent, as in the case of Pundarik Vidyanidhi. So that's the lesson to be learned. The rasa story behind this, the concluding sort of thing that links this story in a beautiful packet, is that who is Gadadhar Pandit in the spiritual world? Srimati Radharani. And who is Pundarik Vidyanidhi? Vrishabhanu. And who is Vrishabhanu related to Radharani? Her father. So Gadadhar Pandit is taking shelter of her father. Because, I'm sorry, I forgot to say, Gadadhar Pandit concluded, oh my God, I committed this offense. Therefore, the only way I can atone for having committed this offense is to take shelter of Pundarik Vidyanidhi and take initiation from him. And so he approached him and begged initiation, which he received. So from a spiritual perspective, it's Srimati Radharani coming to take shelter of her father. Right. So you should remember, and you do already, I mean, you are all senior, most of you to me. So I'm preaching to the choir here. But maybe you should tell others that you are preaching to not to artificially renounce whatever talent they may have, whatever intelligence they may have, whatever money they may have. It's not maya, it's not illusory. On the contrary, it's a gift from God, and one, you should engage it in Krishna's service. You should engage it in Krishna's service. See, this is what Prabhupada talked about when he was talking about cultural revolution. Right? The cultural revolution of Krishna consciousness that is supposed to take over the world. That happens through Yukta Vairagya, through individual Vaishnavas engaging their wealth, engaging their talents, engaging their intelligence, engaging whatever they have at their disposal in Krishna's service, in the Sankirtan movement. So ask yourself, like, what have I received? What is my lot, karmically speaking, in this life? Like somebody may, have a lot of wealth. Someone may be a very strong person who can work very well. Someone else may be very patient. There's just almost an unlimited variety of karmic, right, combinations that create a particular type of body in which one of us is in. And so what is your particular gift, we could say? What is your particular karma, and how can you engage it in Krishna's service? I wish I had been taught this at the beginning. Coming back to my early years, I joined in a time when ISKCON, I would say, was, like, would you ever go surfing? You catch a wave, and while it's strong, you ride it, and then at the end of the wave, when it loses strength, you stop surfing because there's no more wave pushing you. The wave is finished. So I became a member of ISKCON in the 1990s when I think was the last part of the wave of a trend which was perhaps necessary, and I don't want to get too much into the history of it, but a necessary sort of phase in ISKCON where much of the emphasis was on joining as a full-time, so to speak, missionary, isn't it? And then you ask Srila Prabhupada's disciples, they all use the word joined. When did you join? When did I join? But when you speak to someone who just converted to Christianity, for example, they never say, I joined. I converted. I became a Christian 5-10 years ago. I became a follower of Christ 20 years ago, But in the 70s and early 80s, there was this mood that, okay, if you actually become interested in Krishna consciousness, it basically means you have to renounce your family, renounce your career and join a temple and join a community, isn't it? How did that happen? Why did that happen? Did Prabhupada encourage that? Did he have a very limited amount of time left on his watch? Did he have to try to secure ISKCON in a way that would continue, that would secure its continuation after his passing away? All these factors are to be considered. But we cannot forget the philosophy, the basic theology, which is what we've just explained, which is what Krishna described, and which he speaks of in verse number 3, which we can go to now. I'll read it. The verse 3 is like this: one who neither hates nor desires the fruits of his activities is known to be always renounced. Such a person, free from all dualities, easily overcomes material bondage and is completely liberated, O mighty armed Arjuna. So again, this theme of working, but just being detached from the result and giving the result to Krishna. May I take your attention and go to one verse in the 3rd chapter which relates to these 3 verses? In verse 3, chapter 3, verse 9, we hear something very similar that relates to this notion of action in Krishna's service. If you will, please go to verse 9 of chapter 3, which is on page 154 for those who have this edition of it. Yes, yagyartat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana tadartam karma konteya mukta sangha samachara. It's the same idea, right? That this world, Krishna calls it karma bandhana. He literally calls this world karma bondage. This world is karma bondage. Anything you do will bind you. So we've seen option A, the sort of Buddhist, Mayavadi option. Let's just not do anything. Let's just stop work. Let's stop breathing. And somehow we'll avoid entanglement in the material world. Not practical. Not fun. I mean, wouldn't you prefer much more like chanting Hare Krishna than being silent for 50 years? Isn't it? I mean, how fun is doing kirtan or eating prasadam, or even when it's tragic, it's still transcendental, it's still fun. Bhakti has emotions which we do not deny. Again, coming back to this idea that this world is not false, that we believe this world is not false, it's real. Similarly, we believe that we as souls are eternal, are real, and therefore the pure emotions of the soul are real. And the reason I'm saying this is because that's the main realization I got from Gunagrahi Maharaj's passing away. And I think it's related to this, so let me say a few words about it. I was filming. Ramai Pandit's wife gave me her phone, and I was the one who filmed the last passing away of Gunagrahi Maharaj, the video that has been seen by 20,000 people on Facebook. I got on a chair because everyone was rushing him, and including Bibi Govinda Maharaj, especially him, and other disciples of Prabhupada, dear to him, close to him. And so Danishta Mataji said, she gave me her phone. She said, you film it. So I was filming, and I didn't just want to film Maharaj's face. I wanted to film the reaction of other devotees. And I wasn't crying, but whenever I would film disciples or close devotees related to Gunagrahi Maharaj looking to him, my heart would feel a pinch, and I would have tears. And especially when I would film the close servant of Gunagrahi Maharaj, who would take his phone on like live messenger and would have disciples of Gunagrahi Maharaj looking, and he would bring the camera to Gunagrahi Maharaj's face so they would be able to, in live time offer their last respects to him. That emotion of feeling sadness at the imminent departure of one's spiritual master, or the kind of tears that we saw Bibi Govinda Maharaj have, at the time of placing Gunagrahi Maharaj into Samadhi. And I mention him because, as you know, if you've read his offering, but Gunagrahi Maharaj made him a devotee. He was the first devotee he ever met, right? So he obviously had a very deep relationship with him. So those tears are not Maya. Those tears are real. because they're devotional, and we believe that devotion, bhakti, is real. How beautiful is that? How wonderful is that? How liberating is that? As opposed, again, to a, Brahma Satyam Jagat Nityam type of philosophy. So coming back to this last verse, and we'll stop here, real renunciation ultimately is a question of consciousness, of placing one's heart at Krishna's lotus feet and seeing this world, seeing others as real, either real souls who have a relationship with Krishna, or as real material objects which are simply Krishna's energy and which have to be engaged in Krishna's service. And with that attitude, the world is open. With that attitude, full freedom is there. Again, a world embracing theology, where we embrace the world, we embrace the souls in this world as being parts and parcels of Krishna, as opposed to negating them and artificially renouncing the world. Hare Krishna, thank you for your kind attention. What are your comments or questions? As they say in auctions, going once, going twice. Prabhu.
You said that we should not renounce our careers and our work. We can offer the fruit.
Prabhu is saying that I said that we should not renounce our careers and we should offer the fruit.
That's what the verse is also saying. Doesn't desire the fruit and neither eats. And so my question is that if your work is how you find that balance where you feel that your work is also a way to connect to Krishna.
You feel that your work is what?
It's an offering to Krishna, because if you spend a lot of time and energy in your work, then sometimes you don't feel, you're Krishna conscious, because it's not direct devotional service that you're doing. You're interacting with the people outside. So, so then you go to the other extreme of feeling like maybe I should just give this up.
Give this up.
Whereas what you are talking about is like having this feeling that we can be
How can we see our work as in connection with Krishna?
Yeah. Sometimes to see that connection becomes very difficult.
Are we chanting our rounds well? 'Cause everything we could say comes from our rounds, from our japa. So if we're chanting our rounds well, or at least we're chanting our rounds, then we can hope that Krishna is reminding us of this. That's the first point. On a practical level, are we doing our sadhana as we're supposed to do it? Are we doing our sadhana? And secondly, just like we have to remind ourselves about our meeting with the boss in 3 days, we also have to remind ourselves of the philosophy. And so I would say just remind yourself that, okay, this is tough work, but I would disagree that it's not indirect. Because what is direct, what is indirect? If you're a householder, it's your dharma to be a householder. And manas deha geha joki chumor arpilutuapade nanda kishore, as Bhakti-yoga Thakur says, I offer this at your lotus feet, my Lord. Because then that would imply that only renunciates are doing direct devotional service, which is not true. Now, the Yuga Dharma, we understand, is chanting Hare Krishna. It's not necessarily working for IBM 10 hours a day. Granted. But can we say that, for example, Bhakti-yoga Thakur was not really doing devotional service when he was working at the court? Or Prabhupada was not really doing devotional service when he was working in the Bose pharmacy? I think if you're reminding yourself that this work is meant to provide money for my griha, to serve as the sort of the caretaker and servant master or guide of my wife and children, and provide for them, and also give maybe a little extra money to sponsor Bhagavad-Gitas or Namahat program at my home, that's direct devotional service. That's direct devotional service. So remind yourself, I would say, that I'm like 99% of other Vaishnava out there. We have a work, and just remind myself, maybe you should pray this song, Manasa Deha Deha Gujogi Chumor song every day, and remind yourself that actually, no, this is what I'm supposed to do, and it's an offering to Krishna, and it's devotional service. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Guruji, my not question, but I want to know how we can develop this this preaching consciousness, because when we see in our Vrindavan, we don't want to leave Vrindavan first, and we have so much comforts also.
We have some what?
We have comfortable life here in Vrindavan. But when we see the other societies, they are growing up more and more, like Brahma Kumari and other things. So when we see, we have this desire, my desire, also we can do also preaching. But when the questions comes to going outside, so we don't want to go. So, and another problem is that we see our senior is there, our authority is there. They don't go outside, so how can we go outside? Understand? So how can I develop this consciousness, revolutionary consciousness, to go outside and preach? Because we know all philosophy. We read Srila Prabhupada these many years. But at that point of the time, we don't want to go. So,
perhaps we can pray to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, please give me more desire to spread your glories. And we can associate with those who have this desire to spread Krishna consciousness. And I think by reading Prabhupada's books and his purports and hearing his lectures, he was preaching personified. And so by associating with him, we're surely to get this rubbing off on us. Maybe it's not your time yet also. Probably we talk about a lifetime in preparation. Maybe Krishna doesn't want you yet. But I think the fact that you're harboring this desire in your heart is actually very healthy. And I'm sure that Krishna will fulfill your desire, because we know from Bhagavad-Gita that nothing pleases Krishna more than someone who helps others come to Krishna. So why would Krishna not fulfill that desire? Right. Nachatasman manuscheshu praschin me priyakritama. So why would Krishna not fulfill that desire? So have patience, my son. It will come. Yes, Prabhu.
Every day we are listening so many topics on different matters. Just like we listen the example of a washerman putting a load on the donkey, and donkey is thinking that for morals of glass, he is doing those things.
You're speaking about me.
Giving the example that how this we are hearing every day, that this thing, but still we do. I will do this service. I will do this service. I will do this service. I will take everything. So what do you say about that one? That what we are doing? We are following. How we are following? We are following our scriptures, or we are in the material world. Whatever is going on, and we are planning that I should do this one. I can do this service. I can do this service, and all the service I want to do. So what do you say about that one?
I don't follow. It seems like pretty good. I mean, over-enthusiasm to do devotional service sounds pretty good.
Devotional service is good. But you see, I want to do all the services. There are so many devotees, I can engage somebody else also.
I see.
So this service also I can do, this service also I can do. So almost 10 to 12 services I can do. So it is not just like putting load on the donkey for the name and fame.
Oh well, now you're bringing up the issue of doing devotional service for name and fame. The very fact that we recognize this is already the first step, and I think the next step is to go in front of the deity and say, "My Lord, you've shown me the mirror, and I am doing my service, or a lot of my service, maybe 50%, 80%, 20%. There's definitely some percentage of my service that I'm doing for pratishta and name and fame and distinction. Please, I don't want this. You purify me of this, my Lord. And give me the intelligence to delegate services to others so I can engage. They can also be engaged in Krishna service, and I can just please you with a pure motivation, and having engaged others in your service too." Chetodarpana Marjanama, purification comes when we want it, and purification comes even when we don't want it. Krishna will eventually purify us of our attachments to name and fame. But I think the more consciously we pray to Krishna to remove that from our heart, just like Prahlad Maharaj is asking, or just like Gajendra, we're reading this in the morning prayers, Gajendra asks, my Lord, please free me not only from material existence, but from the material way of life, which is all based around getting money or getting subtle name and fame and power.
Also, Prabhupada gave the example of Dr. Frog.
Dr. Frog.
Yeah, he's thinking that this ocean is so big, so big, so big. So similarly, we think, oh, we do this one. So maybe our brain also may burst sometime.
Yeah. Yes, it may burst. Fortunately, the soul doesn't burst. The soul is eternal. And if we remain in the Sangha of the Vaishnavas and keep chanting and keep serving, then Chetodarpana Marjanam will take place, and we'll go back to Godhead. So, thank you for your patience, and Panchakalpatarusha Kripa Sindhu Yaja Patidam Pavanyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad-Gita ki jai, Vrindavan Dham ki jai.